Good to be back today. Really good to be back. I was in New York last weekend and hanging out with some different church planters and pastors in New York City. And I've got some responsibilities there, so it takes me back there every now and then. And, you go to other people's churches and you come back and you go, man, I love our church. Like, just even hearing that, just the generosity here and excited about what's going on. I just absolutely love who we are as a church, and I miss it when I'm gone. I really genuinely do. Like, I come back and I'm like, man, I just love being here as a community of faith. It's so good just to be together. It was a crazy long week. It's like one of those weeks where I actually landed in New York on Thursday, and I had a meeting, like it felt like every 10 minutes, and so just like cramming all these different meetings in through the weekend, and a lot of different things. Monday, Tuesday, really busy. Flew into town midnight Spokane time, which is 3 a.m. New York time. When you woke up at like 4 a.m. New York time, that's a long day, so I was really tired. Had a couple of really long days at the office, Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday night at 5, we moved. Moved. It's just like, hey, my buddy that was in New York with me, he goes, are you crazy? Like, you're moving and you just got back from this trip? Like, it was really intense. I was like, yes, I am crazy. So we moved Thursday night, and then all day on Friday, and then Saturday, soccer games. Woohoo for soccer. And so not watching the World Cup like my daughter. And so soccer on Saturday, and then last night a wedding, and then here I am this morning, and I woke up and went, I need a vacation. Like, I know I was just gone, but I need a vacation. Like, I need to get out and away, and like the weather's nice. Anyone else feeling that? Like, feeling it? Like, you want to get, how many of you are like beach people? Raise your hand if you're a beach person. Yeah. How about a lake person? You are a lake person. How about like a really nice resort with good food person? You're that person. Yeah. Some of you are raising your hand. You're just a vacation people. You're like, vacation. Anywhere but here. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, like, some of you, it's awesome. Suggestion for those of you that are vacation people, become a school teacher, right? Right, guys? Right? Woo! Yeah, you're like, 3 months, I'll do whatever I want, right? Well, 2 months, yeah. I love getting out. Like, for me, getting into the wilderness, like getting out and seeing trees and rocks and lakes, and that's just how I get rejuvenated. Years ago, we decided to go to Yosemite National Park. I'd always wanted to go there. So this was years ago. Morgan was like just about 3. And Maddie was getting ready for her first, or just past her first birthday, right? So we decided we're going to go to Yosemite. We lived in Phoenix, and we had this car. We had a 1979 Mercedes 240D. The D supposedly stood for diesel. I think it stood for dud. It was like, the D was for dang this car. It was don't ever buy one. The D stood for all kinds of things. I don't know that diesel was a part of it. So we had this 1979 Mercedes 240D. I swear it was like, did 0 to 60 in 7 minutes. Like 7 minutes. Like, you're just, one time Sherry got a speeding ticket in this car here in Spokane. She's driving. I'm like, how? What did you do? Like, were you going like downhill with a rock? How did you get over the speed limit? It was so hard. Like, this thing was so slow, and it was a manual, so you're like, whang, like, usually that's fun to drive, but not when you're in first gear for like 3 of the 7 minutes, right? We're just grinding this thing out. Come on, baby, you can go. And it was even worse because the air conditioning only blew cold when you were like over 60 or 65. So it was like 10 minutes before you ever got cold in the car, right? So we load up our kids, and we had a bike rack that we put on the back, and we looked like the Clampetts, the Beverly Hillbillies. Like, we load all this stuff on the car, and we put the kids in, and I'm just like so excited about going to Yosemite. But it was like all preceded by hours upon hours of driving through the hot Arizona, California desert, right? And so we kind of head up the backside of Yosemite, kind of the backside through the desert, and we're coming over the back way into the park. And when we start to cross the gate, at this point, like, we're at our limit as a family, right? Like, the kids, the babies are hot and they're crying, and I just keep saying, like, put the pacifier in their mouth, we're going to make it, we're going to get there. You're just like in panic mode. And we get to the top, and I'm like, we are going to savor this moment. And so I pull out a George Winston CD. Some of you know George Winston, kind of like weird hippie instrumental music, and I'm just like, this is going to be so cool. We're going to listen to this really cool music as we drive in. So I put the music in. I'm like, shh, just listen to the music, just trying to like calm this moment down. And we're winding this back way in, and all of a sudden there's traffic. I'm like, you're in California when there's traffic in a national park, right? Like, I'm like, this is ridiculous. There's traffic, and everybody's hitting their brake lights. I'm like, get off your brakes, people. Let's drive, Like, the moment's getting ruined. And we round this corner, and as we come around this corner, all of a sudden, I see Yosemite Valley. Has anyone ever been there? Raise your hand if you've been there. You've seen it. Like, you round this corner. Guess who hit his brakes? this guy. Like, I slam on my brakes. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And Sherry's like, brakes. Come on, we got to keep going. This isn't a good place to stop. So we pull down around. We finally get to this place where I can get out and look. And this valley, unbelievable. Like, I mean, here's like Half Dome and El Capitan and these waterfalls and the trees. And like, I'm standing there and I'm looking from one side to the next. I'm just looking at this entire scene, absorbing it in. And maybe you've heard me tell this story or talk about this before. And the reason I will tell this story over and over again is because I will never forget that moment. I'll never forget standing there and seeing all of it 3D, in color, in person, right there. Like, that moment for me is frozen in time. There was just a memory that was made. Just something happened when I saw all of this in this grandeur, the beauty, just taking it in, absorbing it. What's interesting is that I'd seen it before in pictures. Right? I'd seen like a picture here. I'd seen a picture of this. And I'd seen a picture of this other part here or there, and I had Ansel Adams pictures in our house, So I had seen these pictures. So I had seen it before. But none of those pictures, none of those two-dimensional images of one little segment was able to capture what I experienced in that moment of standing there and absorbing the panoramic view that was around me. There was something spectacular about it. In fact, something else happened for me. You know those crazy stories about people who like go to great lengths to try to preserve nature? Like people that, they climb trees and camp in them for like 6 months. You know those stories? You're like, get a job, man. Like, what are you doing? If you don't have a job, that's what you do. But you hear these stories, and I remember thinking to myself, like, why do people do that? And I've heard those kinds of things before. People who spend all kinds of energy trying to change legislation and trying to fight to protect natural resource, all these different things. And I'll tell you, like, for so many situations, it never made sense. But as I stood there and absorbed Yosemite, as I sat there, I thought, now it makes sense. Now I know why you would fight for this. I know why you would defend this. I know why you would be ridiculous for this, because there is nothing like this. This is so amazing and beautiful and wonderful. It's fascinating to me that sacrifice made sense in that moment. Because then I think about other stories. I think about this. There are times when I hear stories about people who are sacrificing for the sake of the kingdom of God, people that sacrifice for the sake of the gospel. I hear stories, and maybe you do, or you hear stories about people who just go all in, they are living their life for God. You hear them say those types of things. You hear the stories, you see the examples, you read the Bible, and you maybe see that there are these individuals like the disciples who sacrificed deeply and greatly for the sake of the gospel, men that were crucified upside down, men that were stoned, men that were imprisoned and beaten. Maybe you hear these stories, and maybe you hear the modern examples of people just sacrificing all kinds of levels. If you ever hear those stories and you say to yourself, I don't really understand why people do that. If you ever find yourself hearing that and going, that's really amazing, but if there's something deep inside of you that goes, what makes a person do that? There's something in you that makes you wonder, like, what did it take? Like, were they just extra faithful? Like, is there something about their DNA that just made them different? Like, why would they climb the tree for some sake of an illustration, for the sake of the cross and Jesus? Why would they do this? Is what's in them that would... If you ever find yourself wrestling with those types of questions, like, how does somebody sacrifice that way? My guess is that you ask that question because you've never stood in the middle of this view and seen God for everything that He is, understood who God is, and understood from the very beginning to the very end, to be able to look across the panorama, the landscape of life and human history, and understand who God is. That's what I believe. If you're at a position where you find yourself wondering, like, why would somebody do that? My guess is that it's probably because you've never taken it all in. You've never absorbed all of it. You've never really fully grasped all of the grandeur of God and what He's up to in the world. You don't really understand maybe your place in it. Maybe there's a part of you that's like, I kind of get it, but I kind of don't get it. And it's like looking at snapshots. You're looking at fragments and pieces of who God is and what He's doing, but maybe not the full picture. And if that's where you are, if that's the position that you're in, here's Here's the reality. We're starting this series called Panorama, and the whole idea behind it is for me, in my heart, I don't want it to be that way. If there's anybody that ever comes into Summit and calls this their church, there's a part of me that says I have a responsibility to get you to a point where you see God and what He's doing so clearly that you would die for it. Sometimes I wonder, would we die for this? You know, I mean, is this all there is? Is this it? Would you die for this? Would you die for whatever it is we do for an hour on Sunday morning? Is this something that you would die for? This series is about us understanding, what is it that makes people do that? What is it that makes people live that kind of all-out life for God? How does that even happen? I believe it's when we see the whole picture. So that's what we want to do. We want to paint this whole picture. We want to see it. We want to see it clearly, and I want to do that. And I share that with you, but I also want to share with you that I haven't always been this way. My life, I think in some levels, I think my story is very interesting because in some levels it might be like your story. Where for me, I was born and raised in a really good home, really great people. In the first service, I said great twice because my parents were in the first service. And so I had to really emphasize that great part. But honestly, and my dad was up here last week for Father's Day, and you got a good relationship with your dad when you let him come up here when he could just wreak havoc in my life. But I grew up in a great home. My parents became Christians in the middle of life, and when they made the decision to follow Christ, they went all in. They were those people that they just threw everything they had at Christianity, at their faith. They just said, we are 100% in this thing. And so there was this kind of radical thing that happened in my home. There was this transition that took place. And I'll just say this. If you were to look at me when I was a kid, 9, 10 years old, or 12 years old, or 16 years old, here's what you'd have said. You looked at me and you'd have said, that's a really good kid. In fact, my wife still doesn't believe my parents say I never really got in much trouble. When I was younger, I didn't. I made up for it in college. But if you looked at me, you'd go, you know what, he's a pretty good kid. He's a good kid. He goes to church. He's got mediocre knowledge of the Bible. He seems to have some sort of faith. The reality was really something very different. It was this. When I got away to college, all of a sudden there was this crisis for me in college when I realized I don't have any faith at all. I believe certain things intellectually, but there is no relationship with God. And so when you press me to say, when did this whole faith thing get real? It was when I was in college. I realized it. For the first time, I examined my life and my heart, and I was man, there's really something missing in me. And so there's a shift that takes place, right? So what do? I make the decision to get really involved in a college ministry. And so I jump in, and I'm friends with the college pastor, and I'm going on these short-term mission trips, and I'm hanging out with all these other church college people, and we're hanging out and playing guitars and worshiping like hippies, and it was all new to me because now there was no organ and piano. It was just kind of fun, and in fact met my wife in that context, in this kind of getting all involved in church thing, and I was really good at it. I got good at it. I got good at looking right and talking right and hanging out with the right people and doing all these different things, and I just want to be very, very sincere and very clear. It was really important in my life. Really critical season in my life where I was experiencing really, for the first time, the glory of God. I started to understand who He was. I understood the personal dynamic of our relationship. And so I was having these incredible moments, these incredible experiences as a part of this church-type environment. The problem was that I was working construction at the time. So I wake up on Monday morning, and now I'm going from this crazy awesome time together on Sunday, and Monday morning I'm waking up and I'm swinging hammers, listening to classic rock, and eating pie for lunch. That's because we did. We ate pie every day for lunch. It was awesome. But that's my life, and so I'm having these really rad moments with God, and my life is growing, and then I'm waking up and I'm groggy and I'm swinging, and it's what? And I remember asking myself this question: what does this that we're doing have to do with that? There was just tension that exists. What is this whole thing? What is this crazy hour we do on Sunday together? It's 2 hours, however long we rope you into being here. Today longer than most. I'm just kidding. What does this have to do with that? What does this have to do with swinging hammers and eating pie for lunch? What is it? What was the connection? Suddenly I began to realize, yes, I was growing in my faith, but there was this disconnect between my faith and this life I was living. And so here's what I did. You're going to love this. I decided to become a pastor. No joke. Half of you can leave now because that's your pastor's call to ministry, right? Because this is what I figured. I was you know what? This this kind of sucks. Like, that's great. So I want to do this all the time. And so that's what I did. Decided I'm going to be a pastor and I'm going to create really great experiences for people. I'm going to be as involved in this world as I possibly can. I'm going to keep doing things. And that was really good because now I didn't have to live with what is this all about? Now this was about this. And so I started getting better at this. I can look back on my life and say I got better at getting people in a room together. I got better at putting things together by creating an experience where people could encounter God. We could talk about their faith. We could grow people in their faith. We could do all these things. And then suddenly, and I did this for year after year after year, and then suddenly there was this moment when I was faced with a reality, and that was that for 99.9% of the people that I was talking to, they were asking the same question that I was asking way back when. What does this have to do with that? I mean, you want to know why we're not motivated to die for this? It's because we don't know how this... like somebody walks in today and says, you guys can't do this anymore, we're going to kill you all. We go, okay, we'll go somewhere else. Like, this isn't that big of a deal. It's an hour, we hang out. Like, because we don't really know how this really relates to that. There's no connection. We'll figure it out. We'll go meet in a park somewhere. I don't know, because this isn't that big of a deal. It's just an hour on Sunday. I remember running across this quote, and I want to share it with you. But this captured the challenge and summed it up for me so well. Dorothy Sayers said these words. She said, "How can anyone remain interested in a religion that seems to have no concern with 9/10 of life?" This is a real crisis for us. This is a real crisis, and for some of you, the reason that you're kind of mildly interested or maybe somewhat bored sometimes, even with your faith, or maybe just even asking the question, like, what does this look like on Wednesday or Thursday? The question is that all we've ever learned to do is engage our faith for an hour on Sunday, and 9/10 of life gets ignored by our faith. This is how I feel sometimes. You ever walked into? I love going to movies. To me, like, my motto is, if it's an action movie, I'm going to see it in the theater. If it's like a tearjerker movie, I'm not going to see it. Okay, there's no need for that kind of thing. Dramas I'll watch at home because you don't need the big screen. But action movies, you want to be in the theater for an action movie, right? Like, you want the sound, the big screen, the whole thing. Have you ever gone to a movie and, like, no matter how hard you tried to get everybody to get there on time, you ended up late? Anybody ever been late to a movie before? Like, you walk in and the movie's going, like, that is the most, raise your hand if you've ever been there. Like, come on. So the most frustrating thing in the world, because you come in, not only are you going to make everybody else mad as you're coming across them in the row, you're like, pardon me, excuse me. You finally sit down, and when you sit down, if the story's already started, you find yourself looking at the screen and you're trying to figure out what's going on, right? Like, you're looking up there and you're going, okay, what's happening? And you're just kind of in a spot. And then there's this point, if it's like an action type movie, you figure it out. You go, okay, that guy, that's the hero. And those are the people that are getting saved by the hero. And, okay, I guess I'll kind of hang out. And so we're really bright people. We can figure it out. Most of us can walk into a movie. We can be 25, 30 minutes late. Some of us even an hour. You can start a movie that late and you can figure out the basic plot, right? You kind of go, yeah, this is good. I'm kind of getting it. The problem is that when you come in late to a movie, you never get it like the person who got it from the beginning, right? Like, you can watch and you can kind of put pieces together, but the context isn't there. The story isn't developed. You don't quite know the characters. And so while you can figure it out, there's just something that's missing. It's like picking up book 2 in a 3-book series, right? And starting to read. You're like, okay, I can kind of piece this together, but it seems like I'm missing something. I feel that way about faith. I feel like for many of us, we're kind of figuring it out. We've got this idea like, okay, there's the hero and there's Jesus and there's certainly somebody that needs to be rescued, but it's as if we're missing critical parts of the story, which explains why we can't answer the, well, then what question. There are things that we just haven't seen. The panoramic view hasn't been opened up to us. We're just seeing a snapshot of this narrow thing about me and my personal salvation or whatever it might be, and we don't see the larger picture, and because we don't see the larger picture, we're not engaged at the level that God ever intended us to be engaged at. So this series is all about us seeing the wide view, seeing the big perspective, getting outside of ourselves for a moment and outside of our myopic thinking to understand who is God and what is he doing? What is he really doing? What has he been doing? And what's he doing now? And how do I participate in what God's doing? Because that is what makes our faith compelling. That's what people throw their lives in for. People that understand the full picture. So today we're going to start in many ways at the beginning. We're going to start by not thinking about where Jesus has necessarily met us, but we're going to start with God and what he's been doing. And today's going to be a little different. We're going to do some different things today. We're going to do some different things through the course of this series because I really think we need to get ourselves to a place where we see God differently. There needs to be a paradigm shift. And I'll just say this, for some of you this morning, we're going to get done today, and I think you're going to see God from a perspective that you haven't seen him from before. Think you're going to understand some things about who he is that maybe you didn't see before you walked in here today. We're going to walk through 3 different passages today that we're actually going to revisit through the course of the series. The first one is found in Luke chapter 4. And if you have your Bible, I want you to turn to Luke chapter 4. If you don't, we're going to have the words on the screen. You can follow along there. But I want to just give you the context. We're going to walk through these verses, and here's what I want us to be doing as we walk through this. And again, this is going to be a little bit interactive. First service, they were really slow, and I literally thought in my mind, I'm so glad the 11 o'clock service is smarter than the 9 o'clock service, like in general, like way higher IQ. And those of you that attend the 9 normally, I'm sorry. No, but they were kind of slow to the uptake. So like, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I really want us just to kind of interact and think about this. I want you to be at a point today where you're going to think a little and wrap your mind around some things. But I want us to get to a place as we read these passages today where you're asking the question, what does this say about God? What is this telling me about God and who he is and what he's been doing? Not necessarily at this moment, we're going to get there. Not necessarily what does this mean for you in this exact moment, but let's start with God. What has God been doing? Let's get the broader perspective of what he's doing in the world. So Luke chapter 4 is where we're going to start. We're going to start reading in verse 16, and I just want to give you a great little idea of what's happening in Luke chapter 4. Jesus is beginning his public ministry. Now, Jesus actually, we read about the wedding at Cana where he performed a miracle. What we read about in Luke chapter 4 is the first time Jesus stands up in a synagogue and starts teaching. It's shortly after the time that Jesus had gone for 40 days into the desert, was tempted by the devil. He comes out of that time. He returns to his familiar territory. And then this is what we hear from Jesus. And this is really insightful. And you just need to look at what it's telling us about God, about Jesus, about this whole thing of our faith that we're a part of, okay? Verse 16 says that he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him, and he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. I just wanted you to get the picture here, that Jesus stands up to teach, and they hand him Isaiah, and like the scroll. I don't know what this looks like. I just know that they hand him a scroll, and like, I don't know how you flip through a scroll. You don't swipe. I don't know what you do. But they hand him the scroll, and this is really important. They didn't just hand Jesus 5 verses and say, talk about it. They handed him the scroll of Isaiah, and it says that Jesus turns to this specific place where these specific things were written for a very specific reason. And I want you to catch it. Verse 18, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. First thing that Jesus is telling people. Now, this is really important because we assume that the first things that Jesus chooses to do, we assume these things are probably fairly critical. They're going to be very defining, right? We start by saying, this is what I'm all about. So Jesus is beginning and he says, this is what I'm all about. And what does it say? What is he here for? When you look at this, what does it say Jesus is here for? Don't be shy. Say it loud for me. Proclaim liberty. Okay, so liberty. There's this idea of liberty. In fact, it's repeated in this. There's this idea of liberty to the captives, liberty to the oppressed, right? So certainly that's a part of this. Something else. What else is it saying? Set people free. So there's people that are living in bondage. Jesus is saying, I'm here to set people free. What else is there? Sight to the blind. There's people that can't see. I'm going to help them see, right? Anything else in here? Free the oppressed. Proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. He's going to bring good news to the poor. So this is where Jesus starts. Jesus says, this is why I'm on the planet. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm present. And listen to what he's saying. I think this in itself should be challenging to us in our narrow view of how we typically think about our relationship with God and why Jesus came. Jesus comes and he says, I'm here to launch a revolution. I'm here to bring liberty to people who are oppressed. And he uses two different words. He talks about being oppressed and he talks about people being captives. Captives are people who are bound by certain things, right? They're bound up and they don't realize that they're not free. Jesus says, I'm here to set you free. You're a captive. I'm here to set you free. There are people who are oppressed. These are people that are being held down by other people's actions. There's injustice being done to them. There's something being brought against them. It could be violence. It could just be social oppression, whatever it is. Jesus says, I've come to liberate you from that. He looks at the poor and he says, I've come to bring you good news. I've come to tell you something that in the middle of your circumstances and you think everything is horrible, I've come to tell you something good, to lift you out of this. I've come because you can't see things and I want you to see things and I want to pull back the curtain so that you can see reality. I want you to understand this. When you read this and you look, you go, wait, like Jesus is saying, I am here for all of this. Like there's this broad scope of everything that Jesus is saying. He opens up to Isaiah and he says, this is it, man. I've been anointed to do this thing. Let me ask you this. What does this tell you about the heart of God for humanity? He loves us, doesn't he? Like God's desire for us is healing. It's to fix the brokenness. It's to free us when we've been in bondage. It's to liberate us. I mean, you look at this and you realize Jesus is saying, this is why I'm here. But what he's expressing is the heart of God. He's expressing the heart of the Father who says, I want you to experience this kind of life. I want to undo the brokenness. I want to right the wrongs. I want to remove the blindness. I want human beings to thrive. That's what I desire for them. What I love about this is that when Jesus begins reading, he reads out of Isaiah, which should tell us something. This isn't something that just begins with Jesus. There's significance in this, right? You realize that Jesus is saying, I'm here to do this, but when were these words written? Hundreds of years earlier. So what this is unpacking for us is that what Jesus is doing, which while Jesus is the epicenter of our faith, what we're realizing is that what Jesus is doing, what he's inaugurating in the world, is something that's been going on for ages. It's been happening. It's the heart of God long before Jesus enters the scene. He's quoting something that expresses the heart of God. That should challenge our thinking. That's the heart of God towards humanity. That's why Jesus is here to fulfill this vision that God has for his people. Next scripture, John chapter 20. John chapter 20. John chapter 20 happens after the resurrection, and I'm going to kind of dive into some things here that I kind of geek out on. I'll just admit it. But I love the book of John. It's one of my favorite books in the Bible. I don't know if you can have a favorite, but it's one of, that way I can get around it. John chapter 20, Jesus has been resurrected, and this is the story that happens after the resurrection of Jesus. And again, I want you to be thinking, what is this telling us about God and who he is? It says this in verse 19. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them. The door was locked. Jesus is there among them. That's already a little unusual. And he said to them, peace be with you. When you suddenly appear in a room where the door was locked, you look at people and say, peace be with you, because that would freak you out if the door was locked. Last night, a friend of mine snuck into my house and freaked me out. It wasn't very funny. He did not say, peace be with you. He was just there. Hey, like that's not good. Like I'll kill you if you do that. So next time, just couldn't find the gun because we moved. Just kidding. That's a whole nother topic. So verse 20 says this, when he had said this, when he said peace be with you, he showed them his hands and his side, and then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord, and Jesus said to them again, listen to this, listen to what he says, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I'm sending you. And when he said this, he breathed on them and said to them, receive the Holy Spirit. Let me ask you a quick question about this. Who does this say sent Jesus? Who does it say? The Father, right? The Father sends Jesus. What does the Father sending tell you about the mission of Jesus? If the Father sent him, then whose mission is it? It's the Father's, right? Jesus is carrying out a vision, a mission that pre-existed his moments on earth, right? He's talking about something that's happening long before. He's saying, the Father sent me. The Father's the one that initiated this. I'm the one that inaugurated this, but the Father's the one that initiated this. And so God sends Jesus. That's the idea. And then you look at this scene, and I just think this is one of those scenes that we can skim over and not even catch what's really happening here. But Jesus says, listen, I was sent, and now I'm sending you. And then it says, this is the strangest thing, it says that Jesus in this room, he breathes on them. Like breathes on them. Like Jesus says, so the Father sent me, now I'm sending you. And I got bad breath, right? Imagine the kind of breath you have after 3 days in the grave, right? Like you think morning breath is bad, like morning and coffee? Like Jesus does the breath check with the disciples, right? Like Jesus steps up to them and he says, so the Father sent me in this mission, now I'm sending you. And then he breathes. And they're probably like, whoa, God, like, can't you do something about that, right? This idea of breathing, what's it remind you of? Breathing. Creation, right? Creation. When you look at the Old Testament, breathing is how the Old Testament begins in Genesis, right? God is breathing life into creation. God breathes life, and there's life. And now we have Jesus breathing intentionally on his disciples. What's fascinating is when you look at the book of John and you see how it starts. John chapter 1, verse 1, he begins with creation. The story of the book of John is a story about creation and new creation. And in John chapter 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The beginning, creation, breathing, and this is the part that I geek out on, but John starts with creation, and then John records 7 miracles in his gospel, which is fascinating because the number 7 to any Jewish thinker always related to creation. So John starts with creation, and then he intentionally tells 7 miracle stories, which everybody in that culture would have been picking up, that there's 7 of these stories all point into creation. And then Jesus is crucified, and then Jesus is resurrected, and there's an 8th miracle. And the 8th miracle happens on the 8th day. It happens on the first day of a new week. And so John starts with the first week of creation, and then he has this 8th miracle that inaugurates and initiates a new week of creation. Jesus is resurrected, and Jesus in the Bible is called the firstborn of the new creation. Jesus initiates a new kind of creation, and now he steps to his disciples and he breathes on them and says, in the same way that the Father sent me to recreate this, to start a new creation, now I'm sending you. And he breathes and says, you, go. Go. I'm sending you. I'm inviting you to participate in this with me. This is unbelievable stuff. This is the kind of stuff that when you sit back, you realize this is the perspective that I haven't had when I've been looking at my faith and the gospel and the message of Jesus. This is massive. God has a mission, there's this reality of what he's doing in the world, and he's inviting us to participate. There's one more. I want to look at one in the Old Testament. And here's why. Because I think we can get that Jesus has a mission, but I think it's really important that we understand that God has always had a mission. Jeremiah chapter 29. If you have your Bible, flip over to there. Jeremiah chapter 29 is really fascinating. I think it's really challenging. And here's why. I think for a lot of people, and you see this throughout human history, and especially the church in human history, there's this tendency for people who are aligned with God through faith in Jesus Christ. They get to a point where they become essentially sort of a puritanical culture, where they say, our responsibility is to preserve the goodness. And so we are going to put walls up around our community of faith. We're going to all live in this kind of clan type environment, and we're not going to let other people in unless they, agree to look and act like we do, and we're not going to go out for fear that we might get dirty, right? And so that has been the history. And so you look throughout church history and human history, and Christians have always kind of had this ebb and flow of running away and hiding out from the world. Now, what's interesting is that's not something that started with the church. It's actually something that started with Israel. And Jeremiah chapter 29 actually unpacks this reality. In Jeremiah 29, there's a tension that's existing because the people of Israel have been conquered by the nation of Babylon. Babylon had this brilliant plan. They knew that if they were going to be successful as an empire, they needed to eradicate every other culture that would be opposed to them. Their way of eradicating those cultures was to go into a city or to go into a particular region, grab all of the educated, the elite, the wealthy, the young, the upwardly mobile. They would drag them off to their capital, to Babylon, and then they would assimilate them or integrate them into their culture so that they would become one homogeneous culture. That culture would lose their identity as they became a part of the Babylonian city. The people of Israel had been conquered by Babylon. They've been dragged off to this city. All of the leaders, all of the influencers, they've been brought to this place. And now the elders of Israel are saying, stay away. Like, I know we have to go buy groceries, and I know we have to go work our jobs, and we have to feed our families, but they made the decision to live on the outskirts of the city and to form a sort of ghetto where they could be removed from the city of Babylon and not engage. And so this tension exists, and then God sends this message through Jeremiah. And Jeremiah chapter 29 is what God has to say about this reality that's taking place. And this is fascinating. Look at what it says in Jeremiah 29, verse 4. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I've sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Pause right there really quick. Don't go too far. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles. And then what does it say? Whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. People of Israel thinking like something's going wrong, and so now we've been brought to this place and we just need to hold out until God saves us and puts us back. And look at what God says. He goes, no, you are an exiled people. You are an exiled people. I actually brought you here on purpose to live as exiles in this place. Radical shift in thinking. This isn't about God preserving and protecting us. God brought us here. And then listen to what he says in the next verses. Verse 5, he says, build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. He's saying, I want you to thrive there. I want you to thrive as exiles. And then listen to what he says next. But seek the welfare, the shalom, the peace of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare you will find your welfare. And then he kind of confronts this tension that exists. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are among you deceive you, and do not listen to the dreams that they dream, for it's a lie that they are prophesying to you in my name. I did not send them, declares the Lord. I never told you to separate yourselves from them. I told you to engage. It's an unbelievable picture. What is God asking them to do? He says, I want you to seek the peace of the city. I want you to seek the shalom. It's this Hebrew word that encompasses human flourishing on every level. It's this idea that the people of Israel should be living in such a way that injustice is being undone. That people that are being oppressed are being liberated from their oppression. People that are captives are no longer captives. People that are blinded and unaware of even spiritual blindness or spiritual realities, that those blinders are removed. You understand the same thing that Jesus is talking about in Isaiah when he was quoting that in Luke chapter 4 is what God's expressing in Jeremiah chapter 29. I have a vision for people. I have a vision for humanity. It's flourishing. It's the binds of sin being broken in your life. It's you living as the free person I created you to be. It's you flourishing as a humanity. It's you actually living the life I created you to live in the very beginning. And he says, you, my people, go into the city and seek this. Live it out. Bring it. Be positive. I love the beginning of service and grant praise for our city today, because that's the call of God, to live out our faith in front of our city, to say, I want to seek the peace of the city. That's what God is saying. I want human flourishing, and I want you to participate in this with me. And there's this theme. If you see this, it's running through this, and this is what I want you to catch this morning. This is the part that I just want you to understand. This may, for some of you, you may go, I get it. For others of you, this may be something that you've never realized about God. But notice that the theme through all of these passages of Scripture is that we aren't seeking God. He's seeking us. This isn't about us coming to Him. All of this is about God coming to us. This isn't us trying to figure out God. This is God trying to figure us. This is like God's pursuing us. He's after us. He's engaging us. There's this term, a Latin term, that's used to describe this idea, the mission of God. It's called the Missio Dei. It's something that we've lost perspective of in the world today, and especially in our American culture. The Missio Dei, the mission of God. It's this reality that God is on mission. God has a hope for humanity, and it doesn't just all wrap up and end neatly in this nice little package that says personal salvation. Oh, you believe? Great. Now just kind of live the American dream, your suburban life, and everything will be good. We know that's not good. Because we wake up in the morning and we go, what does this have to do with that? God's on mission. He's got a plan. He's got something He's doing. And when you start to unravel this and you see this, suddenly the stories of the people who have given their life to this thing, they make sense. You go, okay, now I know, because there's more than just, I believe certain things and have a powerful worship experience. There's actually something to engage. There's something real that God hopes for, and He invites me into this. This has radical implications on our understanding of God, doesn't it? God is coming after you. He's coming after us. He's pursuing us. We're going to do something different right now to kind of, I want, this may be a challenge, but I want you to try to wrap your brain around this in sort of a different way. And we kind of have a unique opportunity this morning because my friends Stu and Jill are here. And so I want them to come up, and I want to just, I want them to share for a couple of minutes. But as they're coming, this is really cool because months ago they said, hey, we're going to be in town. And I said, well, let's do something different. And then I realized we're talking about the mission of God. And these guys, believe it or not, are missionaries. And would you welcome them with me, Stu and Jill? Yeah. I said this in the last service, but gone are the days when missionaries show up at a church with pocket protectors and slideshows, right? Where it's like, phew, phew. Now they show up with man beards and like streaks in hair and stuff like that. So anyway, sorry, Jill. Yeah. So these guys are in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and they're actually missionaries that we support as a church. So and this is in many ways kind of home. You guys have a lot of family at Summit, and then Spokane is home, and you guys still have a house here, and yet you live in Thailand. And I wanted them to come for a couple of reasons. One of them is I want you just to kind of hear some of what it's like to be sent and to go and to do what they're doing. And you guys are awesome. In fact, my kids last night were in the car, and I said, yeah, Stu and Jill are here. And the Stu and Jill are here. They got all excited. I'm like, you guys are like rock stars, Chiang Mai rock stars. You guys should get a big shirt in Chiang Mai that says we're a big deal in Spokane, and like walk around like, hey, yeah. So I want you guys to unpack for us and just share a little bit of what it means to go, because I think that's part of this whole idea of God being on mission, God sending, God going. How did you guys come to the place where you went instead of stay? Because I think that's a challenge sometimes to wrap our brain around. And I just want to catch some of that.
I think for both of us, it was on short-term mission trips. That's when we saw there's a big world out there with big needs. And I remember being 16 and in Brazil and saying, God, if you want to use me here, go ahead. Whatever you want. All I need is my water bottle and a hammock, and I'm good. It's like, this is going to be great. And so I went and got some training after high school in Wisconsin, and that's where we met.
Because Wisconsin's the place to go for that.
Yeah.
Cheese and training to live in a foreign culture. Yeah. How about
Fireworks.
you, Stu? Yeah.
Fireworks.
Fireworks, yeah.
I don't know, mine was a little weirder maybe because my dad read me some of those gruesome missionary martyrdom stories when I was a little kid. And in a weird way, I thought that would be cool, they could make an action movie about me someday, how I went off and got killed in the jungles. And I also had a strange problem of liking reptiles when I was little and never really grew out of it. So I thought, I could be a missionary, but I could also, on the side, I could do a little reptile wrangling. And Washington isn't really the place for that. So the Lord will call me to the tropics, I'm sure, because that's
like
where I
the
need to
Steve
be.
Irwin of the missions world.
Yeah. It's like
Crikey, look at the size of that one. Yeah.
A little TV show on the side or something. Yeah. But when I was older, I went overseas, and I guess I got the chance to see what it looked like for other cultures to interact with Christ and see the changes, the positive changes. And I got pretty excited about that, as a more mature, slightly more mature adult, seeing that and, getting excited about being a part of that. So that's where it started. And
so we eventually got married, and we were in Spokane at that time, and we still knew missions was what God wanted us to do. But then we went, well, it's a big mission field out there. What are we actually going to do? And so we prayed about it, and we just felt like God was leading Stu to get a teaching degree. So 5 years later from Eastern Washington University, during that time we had 2 of our kids, and we graduated, and we still knew God was leading us to go to overseas. So we went to Brazil, and we were there for 3 years on the Amazon teaching at a little international school there. And we came back, and we kind of had to get our bearings again and go, okay, now what are we doing again in life? Are we in Spokane? Are we supposed to go overseas? And we came to just a place in our life where we just stopped and went, it's not even our life. God, this is yours. You take it. You tell us what to do. We'll stay in Spokane if you want. At that point, we just had
emphasizing that maybe at that point.
Yeah, it's like, my family's here. His family's in Seattle. This is really nice.
Which I can say for you guys, I mean, the reality is that term missionary at that point in time was less about going someplace, but really for you, it became a lifestyle of you were saying, I could be a missionary in Spokane. I can live this.
Yeah, exactly.
Out. Yeah. So then what?
Yeah, he made it really clear we were supposed to go overseas, and then he just kind of whittled it down to Thailand, and we're like, oh, we like Thai food. That's cool,
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And lizards.
Stacy, and reptiles, it's good. It's hot there. It's good.
Yeah, and so that was, it happened really fast. We were here speaking in front of you guys 2 years ago in July. It was actually at the other church, so we've never been in this building, believe it or not.
Beautiful.
But and then we were there, and so we've been there 2 years now.
Yeah, I think when we signed up to go to Thailand, we kind of assumed we won't go for a while, and the Lord had other plans. We went very quickly, and so it's been 2 years.
So talk a little bit, and I think this is important for us to kind of wrap our mind around. I think this is good for us because we can get so comfortable. And you mentioned the last service that right before you left, you were like, are you sure? Like, why in the world would we do this? Talk about some of just the realities or the tensions of living cross-culturally and having to go from suburban Spokane to Chiang Mai, which how big is Chiang Mai? Remind us. It's
probably officially 300,000, but maybe more like 1 million in the area.
Yeah. So another pretty solid-sized city. Talk about that. What are some of the tensions or just the realities of bending to that culture?
I think one of the big ones when you go overseas, you sacrifice your ability to communicate, and to act like a big grown-up adult. Like, okay, I want to go. I took my son in. I'm like, okay, I've got my Thai app on my phone. We're going to get our first haircut. This shouldn't be too hard, right? I knew a little bit of Thai, and I kind of used my finger to show, okay, this much here. And I came out looking like I was ready to be a Buddhist monk. I was just totally... All my hair was gone, and my son looked just like Forrest Gump. So, I mean, it was like this...
Nice.
We laugh about it now, but at the time, I'm just like, you feel like an idiot, right? You're like, this isn't that hard. But so there's a level of sort of humility or humiliation in a way, like, okay, I am an educated adult, and I know exactly what I want to say, but I can't even communicate with you on a two-year-old level. For me, that's always challenging, The most basic things take a lot longer than you think they should, and you might need to take... we have to take our neighbors everywhere with us, which makes you feel sort of like a kid again too. Like, oh, can you take me to the doctor and tell him what I need to tell him? Or you're sitting there as they talk, just scuffing your foot on the carpet, or
sitting on the
what she said,
sitting on the crunchy paper.
Yeah,
like
in
you're
your
12.
underwear.
Yeah, with your neighbor. Yeah, it's awkward.
This is weird.
Yeah.
One thing we really were praying about before we went over is where we're going to live, because we knew where we would live would impact us as a family and our kids, and we really wanted to live in the culture. We wanted to be with the Thai people. And so we found this house, and it's just amazing. Our next-door neighbors are our landlords. They're both retired, so they have all the time in the world. And it's great. They're Buddhists. They have their little shrine in the corner, and we're just able to interact on a daily basis with them. They see me in the morning, wrangling my kids, talking strongly to them to get in the car. They see all that, but then they, I go over there, we have lunch.
Talking strongly, that's what I'm going to start using. Yeah. I'm not yelling. Yeah. I'm not yelling. I'm just talking strongly.
Emphasizing.
Yeah.
They're showing me how to make their amazing Thai food, and they're holding up a baked potato going, how do you make this? And I'm like, pretty easy. Yeah. Just back and forth. So it's just interaction. It's doing life together, and that was real important for us to find.
At the same time, it was a little weird because, like, our neighbor, we call her Yai, which is grandma, I guess, Mrs. Grandma, we call her. And she came over and was really micromanaging the property. Like, she'd come over at night and be like, you guys left your gate, 1 inch open last night, and you didn't turn on your carport light. And that's very important. And initially, that was for me, again, like I'm an American. It's like I know how to take care of myself, and it doesn't matter if my gate's an inch open.
I have a beard. Nobody's gonna mess with me.
Don't mess with me. I'm a big man, even though I can't talk or anything. But but then we kind of like, okay, we need to respect them. This is a respect culture and a hierarchical culture, so we have to. There are elders and. So we rolled with that, and later we realized like this is all part of the spirit world for them, and it's if we'd have scoffed at that or kind of like it's no big deal, that would have probably destroyed some of our chances. So little things like that, like we realize, are huge, and we're glad the spirit gave us the ability to see that, I guess.
Yeah.
But lots of bending. Yeah.
How about sacrifice? I mean, you guys obviously have to sacrifice a lot. What do you feel like you've sacrificed to be there? It's been 2 years living in this culture.
I think just when I went there, I didn't know what food to buy, where to buy it, when to buy it. Sometimes they close down stores at certain hours. I didn't know where to get mattresses. I didn't come with towels and pills and all that. And I'm just going, now, where do I buy this? Are those going to fall apart? Mm-hmm. So my whole ability as a mom and a wife was just like, I had no idea. So there goes all my experience of everything that I knew, and it's down to what are we going to eat tonight for dinner, and just the real basics. So I sacrificed all that and just, little by little built that back up, but also just sacrificing family, like holidays with family. Our house that we have here is just 2 blocks from my parents and then a block from my brother. And it's like we had it really good, and
and maybe some of the other things we think with sacrificing with our kids, just seeing your kids kind of be uprooted and then have to get into a whole new culture, it's hard to see them struggle, and that's big too. It took us a lot of, it takes extra support for everyone. And then Thai food has been a big sacrifice.
Yeah, we love it, but
our
stomachs don't.
We love Thai food, but I mean, and Thai bamboo, that's pretty good, but you consistently eat Thai food in Thailand, and it seems like you get what they call Thai tummy, which is a nice euphemism for feeling sick half the time, I guess. So, and again, some embarrassing cultural moments when you're crunching on something that was in your soup and you don't know what it is, and then you look over and you realize like all the Thai people are not eating that. They've like put it on a napkin, and you're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to. You've got a crab claw stuck in your gums at that point or something, and they're like, okay. But,
unbelievable.
Yeah. But it's a daily, there's daily sacrifices and daily surprises, and yet we feel like God He's proved Himself every time, and it's been a very difficult 2 years physically and just challenging living, but we wouldn't trade it. We've been able to see God work, and there was a time there where we were praying we're like, God, I think we're tracking with you. We don't need more problems. We don't need more health problems. We don't need that kind of stuff. And then to realize that He's using this to make us shine brighter and for us to seek Him more purely. And so that was encouraging. Yeah.
You guys there's ways to get in touch with you guys. And one of the reasons I wanted them to be here is so you guys could kind of hear what's going on in their world and their life. They're on Instagram. You can follow them on Instagram. And trust me, there's lots of lizard pictures. Lizards, motorcycles, and things like that. But You can follow these guys on Instagram and kind of hear more. And I just want them to come, also just because they're part of our family, and just wanted them to have a weekend where they could share a little bit, be encouraged. Stu mentioned last week, there's not a lot of hugging that goes on in Thai culture, so we hug, especially because I made her cry.
That's special, yeah.
Yeah,
I forgive you.
Hugs are special. So would you give these guys a hand? Thanks for coming. They're going to be hanging out after the service. The other reason I really want them to share, and we talked about this, is there's something about what I'm talking about this morning that I think only becomes a reality, only shifts our thinking about God when we see in flesh and blood what it looks like to be on mission. But in the same way that these guys have uprooted and gone to this place for the sake of a culture, because of a dream and a hope for those people, in the same way, what we're unpacking is this reality that our God has done the same thing for us. Our God is a God of mission. And it isn't about going to some foreign land, and they'll be the first to tell you that. It's the reality that God has come to us. It's as if we could look at this table and see God sitting here and him saying, yeah, I've had to bend to get you to understand my dreams for you. I've had to come alongside of you. I've had to be creative. I've had to do things to try to do this. But most of all, he says, I've sacrificed for you. I've given my son for you so that you would know me, so that you could be a part of this with me. And when I think about God in that perspective, when I think about that heart of those two people doing that for the people of Chiang Mai, when I think that that's the heart that my Heavenly Father has for me and he has for you, that changes everything. He wasn't just trying to snatch me up and say, okay, you're good to go until you die. He's saying, no, listen, I came to you and I sacrificed for you, and I want you to be a part of this with me. Does that make sense? All of these things, Jesus is saying, listen, I've been up to this. I've been on mission. I've been pursuing this. I have a dream for humanity. And what I love is this scene in John chapter 20 where he breathes on the disciples and he says, I want you to be in this with me. I want you to participate with me. I want this time on a Sunday, I want this to make sense. I want that and what you're going to get up and do tomorrow, swinging a hammer and eating pie or doing whatever it is you're going to do. I want that to make sense. I want that to come to life. In fact, this is what's fascinating for me. Do you realize that most of the stories of Jesus that we're most compelled with, the stories that we love, they didn't happen during a Sunday morning service at a church. They happened as Jesus was out living the mission that he invites us to live. You stand with me? Let me pray for you. May you be men and women who understand that the mission of God is far more grand than you ever imagined. May you realize that your God has pursued you and is inviting you to participate with him. And may you live this week with a greater sense of what that is all about. May your faith thrive. May you be the kind of person who fully understands that God has called you into a world where you can bring about change. Amen.